And hello, business people. This is Professor Peter Gregory, and I'm going to be showing you the Chapter 3 Jacob's homework problems 10 and 11, which you'll need to submit both through Connect and then submit an Excel file up on eClass with. I just want to go over some basic things to get you warmed up to this. Now, some of the finance that we're going to see in the course, I want to go over this. You've probably seen before, you should have seen before in your finance courses and whatnot. And so we're looking at base cases. This is the issue of base cases in Chapter 3. And we set up a project. It's up to you to read this. You need to do the Learn Smart for Chapter 3 and make sure you've read through all that and answer the questions on the chapter. And so basically, in this base case, what we're trying to do is create a template for a project that has several phases in it. So we take Excel. We're going to try to get pretty good at Excel. So go ahead and open up your Excel sheet. And what you're going to do is recreate headers that are appropriate to the homework problems that you see there. Okay. And for the problem in the book, they actually use 4 years worth of projections here. For each year, they're projecting by quarter, which is usually enough granularity when you're doing a projection. If you go by months, that's a whole lot more work. So sometimes on a project, you want to get a rough idea, and that's what a base case is all about. So you can see for each year, we have Q1 through Q4, all right? And so the nature of these problems is we actually create a little graphical representation of the schedule here, the phases that are going to take place. And the example in the chapter says we have a development phase, a ramp up phase, marketing and support phase, and then production and sales. Okay. So generally, the production is going to equal sales. In a rough cut as to how the project's going to go, you're going to build exactly what you're going to sell. All right. And that's good enough for when you're doing base case or straw man here. We're going to take a look at. Okay. And so the development takes place over 4 quarters, and we flood the cells here with red to indicate underneath the quarters that development is active. And we can see before development finishes, we started up a ramp up for 2 quarters. And before the ramp up finishes, we start up our marketing and support. So you have to get out to the market and chirping in everybody's ears and letting them know what a great thing is coming down the pipe for them. Okay. And then finally, we have full on production and sales running from Q2 of year 2 all the way out to the end of year 4. Okay. So that gives you a nice visual representation, something you can get used to here, something you might not have used before in Excel. You tend to think of it as all this kind of data, these data that we have down here that you put in there, but you can do some visual work in Excel as well. All right. So if you notice, we're going to basically reproduce everything from the top down to the bottom. And if you read through the problem, it ended up giving us not a hard expense for production and a hard revenue for sales. What it's going to do is give you a volume, some kind of unit volume at what price you're going to sell it and at what price it costs to produce it. Okay. So in a way, this somewhat looks like a P&L statement, although we're listing things in the order that they occur. We don't, in a P&L statement, you list your revenues up top and your expenses below. But in this, we want to see over time. This is more of a cash flow representation of how things work over time. Okay. So development cost here. All right. So the development cost was $1 million if you read the story. And if you divide by four into must be $500,000, $5 million. So $5 million divided by four is going to be 1,250,000 per quarter. Okay, so when it tells you you have 4 quarters to be spending $5 million on for development costs, you spread it out over the quarters. Okay, it usually tells you at what rate the expenditures and the sales are going to be coming in. Okay, and it's so if you notice that wherever there's a red flood cell up here, it equates to the numbers. You need to put the numbers in for example development here. You have 4 quarters, and you're going to spread those payments out over the 4 quarters. Drop down to the next phase, the ramp up, and the ramp up had a cost of $1 million per quarter. Okay, and so ramp up is only active during the times that we drew up here. Okay, so that's the point of drawing it, so that we can line this up and double check it. It just really simplifies and assists you getting numbers into the right areas down here. As quick visual reference to your audience, you can explain how things are working here. Okay, so the marketing support cost here. The marketing support came out, looks like it's about $1 million a quarter, a year, spread out over a year. That's 250. $5,000 a quarter. Okay. But here's where we get to production volume is 5,000, and they're going to give us the unit production cost is uh, whatever it is. Is that if this is in thousands, did we mark this whole thing in thousands? Right. This whole graph obviously is in thousands, and so this would be $400 for the unit production cost. Okay, and so the total production cost would be 400 times 5 million would come out to a cost of minus $2 million. Okay, so you can see that's just repeated. We just have steady build rate here, expenses for the production cost. Sales volume in this case is equal to each other, 5,000 or 5 million, right? Don't forget we're talking in thousands here. So 5 mil and 5 mil. We build as many as we sell that period. Okay. And the unit price is twice what the cost is, so we should be clearing something. We should have some headroom on this. Okay. In other words, we have a profit on it or some margin on it. Okay. Now we're going to have a summary. This is the hard data that comes out of the problem. Okay. So in Excel, what we're going to do is we're going to correctly sum up anything in the columns above, row by row. We're going to pick out what the elements are to add up to find out what our period cash flow is. Okay. So these first few months, we only had a mil 250,000 per quarter. There's nothing else below it. And so that comes out as a negative because it's an outflow. All right. But as we get over to a period where there's concurrent activity going on between development and ramp up costs, you can notice that in their Excel sheet, they've added these. Okay, so they come out as a strong negative. It's minus 2,250,000 for that period. Okay, and what happens is our development cost goes away the next period, but we pick up some marketing cost, all right? So we have a million plus 250,000. It drops down to our period cash flow. So again, in Excel, the formula in here is going to add these columns, okay? Now you want to be careful that you're adding the right things. You have to set up the equation the right way, okay? So now it gets a little bit interesting because we have production and sales going on, okay? And if you net out what happens here, you have 250,000 going out. We're spending 2 million going out on producing the product, but then we have 4 million coming in, and if you add all that up, it nets out to 1,750,000 for that period. Okay, and so I've gotten you far enough into the table or the chart here that we've gotten so far, and you'll notice it goes into what we call steady state. There's nothing changing period to period, so you use the benefits and power of Excel, so you can put in a number, end up dragging the formula or the number across the entire row. Okay, so that makes things go much quicker. Once you get your formula set up right, then dragging and dropping the contents into the cells using the correct cell references should go pretty smoothly. Okay, so we've done everything but this one line down here. We have this thing called the present value of some year. Okay, so I'm going to flip over. I'm going to talk about present value now. Let's get into this is the challenge of the problem. Okay, so we're going to talk about the time value of money whenever we talk about future value and present value and such. And I'm going to show you how we come around to the equation that we use. It's not too difficult, and then once you use it and practice it a few times, embed that you own it, and that makes you a better business person here. So I'm going to flip over to Excel. I want a new sheet here. I'm going to create a new file. All right, so we're going to create a new file to do this with. And what I want to do is copy the numbers that we had there. So I'm going to try to carefully copy a mil 220,000. The next number was mil 190. I'm sorry, I'm copying the wrong column here. 1250. First number was 1250. Second number, and we can go for 4 more rows. We can just copy this over. Okay, so these are the numbers. These are the cash flows for the first 5 periods. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just to help us out here, that's month 1. I'm sorry, quarter 1. Quarter 2. Now that we have that, you can grab the handle at the bottom and drag that out to quarter 4. And I'm going to Control C. I'm going to copy that 3 more times. Control V, Control V, Control V. So this is our year 1. This is our year 2. This is our year 3. And this is our year 4. There's year 4. Okay. All right. So all I'm doing is I'm hand copying the numbers over from this example here. Okay. So we have 1, 2, 2, 2. Okay. Actually, it's 2, 2, 5 here. Third period. If you look at it, it's 2, 2, 5 here. The next one is a mil 250, 750 from there out. Okay, so from here on out, it's 1,750,000. Okay, so we're putting this in thousands. And so you can see how fast I'm actually able to get this in here. We use the power of Excel, just drag that across. So these are straight up cash flows that come out. Now we understand the time value of money, and there are 3 sources of wanting to use a discount rate here. And the first one might be interest that we're going to have to pay on a loan that we take out to be able to fund this. The other one is inflation that works against us, the value of money. And the third thing was what we would talk about as far as opportunity cost. If we had another project that we knew that the rate of return on quarter by quarter, what it would be is we might use the discount rate assigned, we understand, to the opportunity cost of another project. So there are 3 interpretations of why we use a discount rate, but you execute it the same way. Okay, so those are the cash flows. And what we want to do is we want to figure out what the present value is for each of these. Okay, now there's a subtle difference between how these projects are stated in our book. Okay, and one of these conventions says at the beginning of the quarter, this number represents the inflow or the outflow of cash. Okay, there's a subtle difference between whether you're measuring at the beginning of a period or at the end of the period, and some of them are at the beginning, some of them are at the end. This problem assumes that the evaluation of your cash flow is taking place at the end of 90 days or a quarter. Okay, so what I have to do here is make sure I got the negatives in there, which I didn't get correct. Whoops, excuse me. Try that one more time. Minus enter. Okay, so if we got these right, it's going to be something like that. That's going to be negative, and I believe this one is also negative. Enter. Just make sure we get these right. Okay, now what we can do in Excel is we can add in a column for total out here. That would be something we would want to do, right? And generally totals we hit with a lot of yellow or gold here, generally in Excel. Okay, and so what we're going to do is I'm going to do some very light formatting on this, and I grabbed some cells here, grabbing all this. I'm going to paint them, drop the paint in there with a dark blue. Usually I use a dark blue, something like that, and I hit it with white letters to pop out of there, bold them up so you can actually read them. Okay, so when you use the reverse text technique there, you usually have to bold it up to make them look appear readable there. Okay, so you can see what we have here. We had summed all the columns up. I'm only copying over the final results here. I'm going to go back, just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 periods were negative and the rest were positive. Okay, because what I'm about to do here is I want to add up that row. So I'm going to hit Alt equals. That's a shortcut. And in this case, Excel behaved correctly, but you always have to watch to make sure it's grabbing the right cells. I hit enter. It did a really quick run up on that. It said it was worth $12 million. Okay. Now, the issue is that if we have interest working against us, we have inflation working against us, or we're measuring against some other project for opportunity cost, every period here, we're measuring in a time value of money. Okay. So the equation that we use, let's see if this works. Good, this works. Try to use my pen here. Okay. So basically what we have to do is we have to discount each of these periods by the effect of the discount rate. So generally what we do is we take whatever the cash flow is, and we have to consider what period we're working in. Okay, so we have the cash flow of some period. This would be the first period. I believe this problem is looking at it as though we're evaluating all these cash flows at the end of the 90 days, not at the beginning of the 90 days. All right. So what we do is you take the cash flow, and what we want to do is we want to discount it by 1 plus the rate for that period raised to the power of whatever period it's in. Okay, so there's a little shortcut that we can do here. I'm going to grab row 5 here. I'm going to insert a couple here. If I do a control Y, okay. So what I did is I just inserted 3 rows there. I just clicked the row, right clicked on it, and you're able to insert. And then I use control Y, which is repeat the last command. And you end up, I just needed a little bit of headroom up here. Now there's a little trick in Excel that you use for these periodic payments. And what you do is you put the number of the period somewhere above or below the entire table that you're using, okay? And I mark in here what period that we want to know about. So we have 16 periods, that's 4 quarters over 4 years, 16 periods. We're going to use that number in our equations because that's the period. We need to raise it to whatever the period is, okay? So let's say that, what is our annual rate here? I don't know what they use in the problem. Let me just see if I can find it here really quickly. Do they tell us what it is? Discount rate. Just going to use 10%. And I just, oh, there we go. Okay, so they do use 10% there. That's what I thought they used. Okay, so they use 10% in this problem. I'm going to come back here and use our annual rate, our simple annual rate. And what you need to do is you need to format this as a percentage so things get entered in correctly and get interpreted right. So I'm going to change that cell to percentage and I'm going to type in 10%. And there you go. So although we're reading it as 10.00%, in reality, it's going to use the number 0.10, right? So 0.10 is 10%. Okay, so 10%, it's just how we are formatting the contents of that cell. Okay, so if we take our finance terms here, okay, what we're going to do is I'm also going to add in here per annum, we have the number of periods is 4. Okay, we're going to need that too. Okay, because we have to do something a little tricky here. Okay, one thing that we can do in Excel is you can grab this cell. It's in a table. We're gonna use this over and over again, and you can come up here and you can talk about the annual rate. I can actually name the cell annual rate, and that's gonna help read this later on. Okay, and I'm gonna grab the number of periods here. I'm gonna rename that also. Try that again. And I'm going to name that number of periods. Okay, so you can name cells that you're going to use over and over again. And that actually shows up in our formula down here. Because what we're going to do is we're going to take our cash flow and we are going to divide it by, I'm going to need a few sets of parens here. Okay, so what I'm going to want to do is at least 3 sets of parens. I can see that coming right now. Okay, and that's just to be safe. And I'm going to take 1 plus, and the annual rate is going to be, or the periodic rate is going to be the annual rate over the number of periods per year. Okay, so we're going to take all of that and raise it to what period we're in, which comes from here. Okay, so if I hit enter here, okay, let's take a look at that. Okay, I believe we're getting the right numbers. What I'm going to do is, because we're starting to get, we're getting decimal places here, what I want to do is let's just try, I think this is what they did. We're going to format these numbers as a number. In fact, what we're going to do is do it as a currency. I don't want any decimal places there. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of the dollar sign. I'll show you both ways. So if we leave the dollar sign in there, okay, every cell gets a dollar sign, and sometimes it's a little bit more elegant. Sometimes you want to have it in there depending on what your table looks like, and sometimes it looks more elegant without it. So if we come back to currency, let's just try it without that. And what we're saying is there's different formats for showing negative numbers. We could either show negative, or we could show red, or we could show red and in parens. I like that. That really jumps out at us. Okay, so I'm going to put that in there. So all the negative numbers, that's a nice pro way of showing it up. Okay, all right. So now that we have this calculated present value term for the first term, we should be able to just take this and drag it across. However, we get all these problems. So Control Z. Now, why did we get that problem there, right? Well, we have to come in here and we have to make sure that when we use these table references that we use absolute referencing. So in Excel, what you do is use F4, and that will put those dollar signs in front of the columns and rows, which makes it an absolute reference. Okay, and everything else is okay. We don't need to make anything else absolute referenced. Now it doesn't auto increment when we drag it across. So hopefully some of your earlier training in Excel is coming back. And what we notice here is here's cash flows, hard cold dollars coming in, but in today's dollars, let's say we're using it as inflation, okay? So let's say we're going to interpret our discount rate as inflation in this problem, okay? And it's going to say that because we pay out 1250 in 90 days when there's a 10% inflation rate going on, in today's dollars, it's actually only 1200 and the value is only $1,220, okay? And then the next period, after another 90 days or at 180 days, we pay out another 1250. Well, that's only $1,190 in today's dollars, okay? So both the buyer and the seller have to be accounting for the time value of money as time goes on. You see, every 90 days, let's especially look at when we're clearing $1,750 a quarter there. If we don't accommodate some kind of correction in this, what that means is by the time we get out 6 quarters, one, two, three, four, five, six, we're out 6 quarters. The end of the sixth quarter, when we take in $1,750, in today's dollars, it's only worth $1,509,000. Okay, so we've lost $241,000 worth of value in an environment where there's 10% inflation if we don't correct for it. Okay. So sometimes if you have a buyer and seller, you're able to write a contract that makes adjustments for spot. They do a spot check on inflation every year, and for that year, they'll just keep it uh, pegged or indexed to whatever the reported inflation for the period is or for the year is. If you have a good buyer and seller, everybody understands the time value of money. Okay, and then there's other ways, say, of where you take your investment and put it so that you can offset the negative effects of inflation on the value of what your earnings are or your owning what you own. Okay, so what are the big takeaways so far? So this is just an example out of the book. You'll do the entire upper part of this, but I just wanted to show you the example out of the book how to do it in Excel. And we can see that technically we're going to have $12 million in the bank at the end of this, but in today's money, it's only worth 8 mil and 3,000. Okay, so 8 mil and 3,000. You've lost 30, what is that, 30%? 30%, 33% of the value of the project goes off in inflation. So you kind of double learn on this one, right? You're starting to learn what that time value of money can do. I mean, right now at this point, inflation I think is only maybe 2%, something like that. So what if we just stuck in 2? Let's see what happens here. And the effect if it were 2%, see this is the beauty of using a table and then using those references down here. It shows that we really only lost a little bit less than $1 million due to inflation over 4 years, if it held. And that inflation has been holding for something on the order of probably 10 years now. Okay, so it hasn't really gone up. All right. So that's also a way, this is an adder concept beyond what the problem is asking for, but this is what we call sensitivity analysis. You're able to put in, if you have a correctly created spreadsheet like this, you can put in different numbers here and see what the effect of these different inflation values would be on this. Very common in program, project, product analysis that you do the sensitivity analysis. So let's see. So we learned a little bit. We remember how to run some of these equations for finance. We understand what the effect of inflation is. We can see that the present value, how we calculated all that, and you should be able to get that part of projects or problems 10 and 11 for chapter 3. Thanks very much.